How does a client determine whether to confront an interpersonal conflict with their therapist or whether that conflict has become a boundary violation and it's time to end the therapeutic relationship? That can be a really fine line, and it can obviously differ depending on the individual client, depending on the individual therapist. So for you, if you are considering which of these you want to do, the first thing that I want to say is the really clear boundary of there should never be any sexual contact between a therapist and a client. It's always inappropriate. It is always illegal. And it should not be happening. That is a very serious boundary and trust violation on the part of the therapist. That said, interpersonal relationships is how a lot of personal growth and change happens. It's also where our wounds occur. So when we're in a relationship with a therapist, that's why you might hear, if you've kind of been going to therapy for a while, you might hear countertransference and transference. They're old psychodynamic words that really just are fancy words to say the way the therapist feels about the client and the way the client feels about the therapist. You're going to feel some way about your therapist, and your therapist is going to feel some way about you. The magnificent thing about therapy, the place where healing happens, the reason it's so effective, when it is effective, is because of that relationship, because of the way that the feelings interact, the way that you guys can come together to create new patterns for you as a client in interpersonal relationships. It helps you to practice communication, to practice moving through the really uncomfortable, really hard places, like you really like therapists and therapist has done a lot to help and you feel very loyal to your therapist, and then she puts her foot in her mouth, says something just really shitty or something like that, and now you feel guilty because you feel like you can no longer be yourself in session with her because now you're kind of on edge. You feel like, is she not who I thought she was? Or is it me? Am I being overreactive, etc.? Those are all your storylines that come up that probably had something to do with you going to therapy in the first place. So the only way interpersonal conflict in therapy is unproductive is if you sit with that and never tell your therapist. So when somebody comes to me in a case management or coaching capacity and asks what to do about a relationship rift like that with their therapist, my number one recommendation is, have you talked to them yet about it? Have you told your therapist that it hurt your feelings when she said X? 100% of the time, I should probably say 99.999, just in case there was ever anybody who said something different, but I don't remember it. 100% of the time, in my memory, anecdotally, they haven't. So people will be considering leaving their therapist based on some interpersonal conflict that they haven't even talked to their therapist about. I think that's really normal. It is hard as human beings. We want to avoid conflict. But hey, guess what? You're in therapy to work on this stuff. So if you haven't talked to your therapist about whatever it is that she did that made you upset or hurt or angry or whatever, please, before you consider leaving the therapist, talk to them about it. And if you have talked to them about it, they've acknowledged it, and they continue to do the behavior, that is something else entirely, maybe for a different video. Or if you do talk to them about it, they become defensive and blame it on you, that might also be your clue that you've outgrown this particular therapeutic relationship and it's time to move on. If you have any more questions, please drop me an email at recapearl@gmail.com. That's REACAPEARL@gmail.com, or visit me on my website at recapearl.com. I will see you again real soon.